You can see it really starts burning the material if you apply any pressure just because of that lower melting point. Hey everyone, Zach here with GP CycleWorks. We wanted to do another video because we had an older video, acrylic versus polycarbonate, that had a lot of questions and a lot of feedback on. So we wanted to do a part 2 of the video, acrylic versus polycarbonate. So this is going to be kind of a general video of the different materials. We're going to talk about the characteristics, the stability of the material, the optics of the material, the longevity of the material, along with the production methods we use, and then ultimately help answer the question of what material we use, why we use it, and maybe also answer a question if you have a custom project you're working on and just need to know the difference of the materials. So let's get to it. All right, so the general characteristics of polycarbonate versus acrylic. The biggest difference, which a lot of people think of when they think of the material, is the shatter resistance. So both materials are going to be more shatter resistant than glass, which is why these plastics are used as windshields. So polycarbonate is going to be about 30 to 40 times more shatter resistant than glass, whereas acrylic windshields are going to be about 20 times more shatter resistant to glass. For our applications, and I guess for you if you're looking for a motorcycle windshield, this isn't as critical as a component as it's made out to be. Both materials can crack or can shatter if there is a crack in it. And pretty much from that crack, it can break no matter what. But as far as the shatter resistance, the polycarbonate is actually more shatter resistant. Another main quality of that material is the hardness of it. So polycarbonate is going to be a softer material in general, which leads to scratches and a few other things, which we'll talk about later. Whereas the acrylic is actually going to be a harder material, which is a little more scratch resistant and also make a longer lasting product, which we'll also talk about later. The other general characteristic is the melting points on the material. Polycarbonate has a slightly lower melting point, which makes it harder to work with, kind of makes it gum up a little quicker, and really makes a difference on the production methods we use when making motorcycle windshields. So those are some general characteristics. Now let's kind of get into the specifics of the stability. So in general, a polycarbonate windshield is going to have a lot more flex in it. It's not going to be as stiff as the acrylic. The main difference when you're looking for a motorcycle windshield is going to be the movement of the windshield as it's, going down the highway, breaking wind, is that there's not going to be as much give or break in our acrylic windshields. So that's one reason why we use those for the windshields. I guess while I've got this, the other key point is the optics. Because of the way the materials are made, the optics in acrylic is far superior to polycarbonate. I guess a quick note on how it's made. The acrylic is actually made with liquid acrylic poured into a glass mold that kind of makes a nice sheet of material. Polycarbonate is made using liquid pellets that are melted into a form to make a big sheet of material. So because of this, no matter what, right off the factory shelf of being made material, the optics on the polycarbonate are not going to be as good. The next key point is going to be the longevity of the product. Ultimately, we're making motorcycle windshields that are made to be out on the road and made to last. As you can see here, we've got quite a few polycarbonate windshields, and the main difference you're going to see with these is the general yellowing and the kind of haze that it creates, whereas you can't really see through them over time. This is due to a few different things. The UV breakdown is the biggest thing, whereas this is a similar age windshield to this one, and you can see the general difference in them is that there's not as much UV resistance going on with the acrylic. Sorry, there's not as much UV breakdown going on with the acrylic as there is the polycarbonate windshield. So in general, naturally out of the factory, the acrylic's going to be way more UV stabilized, way more resistant to UV. There are UV coatings that can be put on polycarbonate, which is really only on one side of the material, which increases the cost of the material also, and even then isn't as UV resistant as acrylic is right off the factory floor. So the other key component of the longevity is the scratch resistance and the ability to remove scratches from the material. So a lot of people send us in old polycarbonate windshields and ask if we can get scratches out, and unfortunately there's nothing really you can do. We're going to do a demonstration on that because we've talked about that in the last video and people want to actually see what's going on. So we'll do a little restoration project where we try to restore this old Harley FLT windshield, which is about from 1980, so 45 years old. And then we'll also try and restore this BMW Avon windshield, which is about the same age. And you can see that this customer, before sending it in, did a little restoration project himself as far as gluing in strips and gluing the material. So that's another point to talk about for another video. All right, we're gonna do a little buffing test. We're gonna try and restore a corner of each of these acrylic versus polycarbonate windshields and see how they come out. The first thing we're gonna hit it on is the buffer, when we've got some blue polishing compound and a pretty high-speed buffer. So we're just gonna lightly get the corners and work back and forth. These are also scratched on the inside, so we'll also get the inside. So as you can see, we've pretty much made this crystal clear with just the buffer. We do want to say the buffer is a pretty advanced skill, and you know there's a lot that could go wrong with this, so please only do this if you're a professional. But just to demonstrate the ability of the material, you can see that we've got this corner, and even though it's a 40-year-old windshield, it's very optically clear. So we're going to do the same thing with the polycarbonate windshield and see if we can get it as clear as that corner. We kind of know the answer already, so I'm going to buff this as light as possible to try to eliminate the material burning, but most likely it's going to burn because of that lower melting point. So we'll go ahead and turn on the buffer and get some compound on there again. And go real slow and see if we can get out the scratches as well as we did on the acrylic windshield. So you can see it just on the top surface, it didn't make much of a difference. So we'll go with the inside surface and see if we can clean it up anymore. So as you can see, even with the same amount of buffing, you still have all the scratches. It did take out a little bit of the surface debris, but you still have all the scratches in there. So as you can see here, we restored this corner and did about the same restoration on here. It cleaned up a little bit, but overall you could make this windshield almost brand new. You can see it had some gashes that went all the way in here, and those are pretty much gone. You could still touch up the corners a little bit, but this side, it really looks the same. There's a little bit less haze because you still have that UV breakdown. but the biggest key is that the material doesn't buff and remove scratches as well as the acrylic. Okay, so one thing to note when buffing the polycarbonate is I was going real light on here because I didn't want to burn it. We just tried also buffing this lower corner a little harder to see if we could get the scratches out, but you can see it really starts burning the material if you apply any pressure just because of that lower melting point. So I went real easy on this just to see if we could polish any out without burning the material. But you can see once you go a little harder, you just burn the material and actually make it worse than you had before. So that's just another reason that we go with our acrylic windshields to make the best product over a long period of time. So the last big key difference for us making motorcycle windshields is the production methods that we use. Because the polycarbonate has that lower melting point, it's a lot more difficult to cut the product, sand the product, and make a nice finished edge. It pretty much will want to gum up and get real distorted on the edge while you're sanding it. So you have to be very careful and really takes a lot longer to make a nice finished edge compared to the acrylic finished edges. So it's almost double the production time just making a flat piece with nice finished edges. The other component of the production method is the actual forming side. So as you can see here, this one's flat. This is what we call cold formed polycarbonate windshield. They are made flat and then they're pretty much bent to the hardware. So they're technically cold formed, which only increases the UV breakdown. As you can see, this one started shattering right where it was bent. Whereas the acrylic is a lot nicer to heat form, a lot easier to do that. So we actually heat form all of our acrylic windshields so you don't have to flex it to get in place. So a big question we get all the time is, can we make the polycarbonate windshields? And the answer is yes, we can. Because of the different forming methods, we default to acrylic. We can make a polycarbonate windshield if needed, but the production process is double on the cutting and sanding side and a lot more than double on the actual heat forming side, because you have to dry out the material at a low temperature over 24 hours to get any of the moisture out before you can actually run it through its normal 20-minute heat cycle and 20-minute cooling. So because of that, just on the forming side, the polycarbonate takes more than 24 hours, where you can heat form an acrylic windshield almost immediately after it's cut and sanded. So just the forming side is dropped down to an hour and a half versus over a 30-hour cycle on the polycarbonate. All right, so I hope that helps explain a few key differences between the materials. Ultimately, we use a high-grade cast acrylic for all of the windshields that we make because of the superior stability of the product, the optics of the product, because these are windshields that a lot of time you have to look through, along with the longevity of the product. A lot of times our windshields are out there for 30 years. We've got some bikes here that the windshields have been on. They're 84 and 86 bikes, so about 40 years each we've had the same windshield on. And the last reason we use it is because of the efficient production methods when you're custom making these windshields. If you're mass producing windshields, it can be more efficient to do the polycarbonate, but ultimately it doesn't make as nice of a product long term. The other application that the polycarbonate would be good for is if you're doing any off-roading or something where you really want to worry about the shatter resistant and you don't need a curved windshield. So if you need a flat piece that needs to be really shatter resistant, polycarbonate is going to be the way to go. For the heat-formed, long-lasting motorcycle windshields, we use the acrylic. That being said, we definitely can make polycarbonate. Ultimately, we're a custom shop that will do whatever you want. That just costs a little more due to all the reasons we already talked about. So like I said, I hope that helped answer questions. If you have any ideas for other videos, please put those in the comments below, or also ask us specific questions about the acrylic versus polycarbonate, because we talked about a lot, but we might have missed a few key things, so we can help answer whatever you've got. And yeah, just give us a call, and safe riding out there.